Welcome to the Short Term Show, the show about short-term rentals and long-term wealth, with real property owners hosting real properties who are crushing it in the vacation and short-term rental space. And here's your host, Avery Carl.
This episode of the Short Term Show is brought to you by the Short Term Shop. If you're interested in buying a short-term rental in one of the top vacation markets in America, just go to theshorttermshop.com and click Get Connected with an Agent. If you purchase a home with the shop, you'll have access to all of our client-only benefits, such as training on how to manage your short-term rental. So we'll teach you everything you need to know, from how to set up your Airbnb and Vrbo listings, to how to use the property management software that you'll need to streamline your business, all the way down to helping you source your local boots on the ground like cleaners, handy people, etc. We've taught thousands of people just like you how to buy and manage their vacation homes from anywhere in the world. So head on over to theshorttermshop.com and click Get Connected with an Agent to get started. I do have to mention that we're brokered by EXP or else I get in trouble. We'll see you guys over there. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Short Term Show. You guys know I love to hear about other asset classes besides just short-term rental. We like to mix it up here and there. So I have the GOAT of self-storage, founder of Cedar Creek Capital. You've probably heard of him. If you haven't, then you've never even typed in the words self-storage into the Google machine. So without further ado, I've got AJ Osborne here. AJ, how's it going?
It's going good. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it. So for those who might not be familiar, can you introduce yourself and kind of just give us a little background how you got into self-storage investing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's interesting because I think a lot of real estate investors, no matter what asset class you're in, everything, a lot of us follow a similar path. It is a investment vehicle that we're trying to change our circumstances, right? That was obviously no different for me. I was in sales, so I did insurance sales, which I actually enjoyed. I loved. I followed in my father's footsteps, who sold insurance, and that took him out of poverty. So my father grew up in extreme poverty, not like I think people call poverty today, right? He poached for food and didn't have running water. So, it was outhouse, the works. And my dad is not 100 years old. So he's not that old at all, actually. So it was, he grew up in that circumstance, and that's what took him out of it. And I live in and grew up in a rural city in Idaho. I don't live in a rural city anymore, but that's where I was born. That's where he was from. And he took us out of that, and he sold insurance and moved us to what was considered the big city at the time, Boise, Idaho, which at the time nobody knew where that was. But and he worked really hard, and that kind of led my example, right, of what to do and what I could do growing up. Now, that to me was like the epitome of financial freedom and everything else. Why? Because I was like, I'm in control of my income because it sells. I could sell more, right? And then I was also like, I'm my own boss. And I loved that until I realized that actually probably not only not true, it actually in many ways was worse than a job. The reason being is I had lots of bosses who fired me all the time, and I always had to be earning my income and making up for it. So I viewed it as a treadmill. And with that, we were looking for investments that would get us off the treadmill, like everybody is, right? And that for me was looking at real estate at the time, which was single family homes, small multifamily. This is prior to 2008. So that was the rage, right? And everybody knew you just got wealthy. My friends were getting wealthy just by owning a couple houses. And I didn't know anything really about real estate investing. I knew a lot about business, cash-based business, sales organizations. Since I was familiar with cash-based businesses only, it was very confusing me to see the real estate, because when I was doing numbers, I'm like, how does this make you wealthy? This doesn't even make money. In fact, you lose money every month. And I didn't understand it. Now, my dad found a small storage facility, and he showed me the numbers. And that was different. The storage facility actually made a profit, and it was a good one. And so that's why we went into storage, because we understood it. And the storage facility I viewed as not a real estate asset, but a business, because we had more control over manipulating our income. It's the same thing that I like about short-term rentals. It's like you took a house and turned it into a business. And your yield's higher, you can have cash flow, and two, you can affect. There's things that you can actually do. Like obviously we had you on my podcast, which was a great podcast, but we were talking about this concept with short-term rentals and the things that you do to be a great short-term rental operator and how you look at it. And there's little things that you can do to improve how many people visit, right? It's this, and you have people that are staying, but they're not staying for long periods of time. That's identical to storage. It's like we are the short-term rentals of industrial. That's exactly what it is. Month-to-month leases, 10 by 10s. That's what we are, short-term rentals of industrial warehousing. And so the same reasons that we talked and you like your asset class and what it could do was the same things that I did. And so we went into that. Now, it's funny because a lot of people are like, wow, you went straight into commercial real estate. And to me, I'm like, well, yeah, but you can buy small storage facilities for less than you can find duplexes in most major metropolitan areas. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah. And two, you get 80 doors, not two. And that shocks people, right? Because they're like, I think they hear commercial real estate, they hear storage, stuff like that, and they think, oh, this is huge, this is tens of millions, and I can't do that. And I'm like, well, I in my market today, Boise, Idaho, a duplex runs you like $400,000. I can go buy storage facilities for less than that in markets all across the United States. They have more doors, higher cash flow, they have better terms, everything else. So I think that for me, I didn't have those preconceived notions because I didn't understand real estate. And so that actually made it easy. And we went into it thinking and acting like it was a business. And that was how we got started. And that was supposed to be our retirement plan to save us everything else. Now, as we did that and built it up, I got to a point where I'm like, I got to get out of insurance completely. And so we really dove all in. And I was working for the second largest national brokerage firm at the time, and we'd built up our storage portfolio, and it was big. And I was kind of like, man, I'm living the dream here. I was working for this national brokerage firm. I was running their location, and I had the side business that I made grow that was like I still worked on. I was working two jobs, but they had kind of golden handcuffs on me, so I didn't want to lose my income because everybody knows you want to put your money into real estate. But I knew that I had to leave. I knew that there was a time that I needed to break off, but I was probably too addicted to my income, as most people feel and know. They understand. There's a reason why we call them golden handcuffs, which can happen at any level, 50,000, 150,000. An income is a golden handcuff. That's literally what it is, right? And so when I didn't want to stop. Now, I got kicked off my treadmill, as I like to say, meaning that I became a quadriplegic overnight. I became paralyzed from the eyes down. I was fine 1 minute, and the next minute I was in pain. I went to get in the bathtub because my legs hurt, and I couldn't. When I went to get out, my legs didn't work. My wife drugged me out of the tub, took me to the hospital, and within a few days, I was put on life support. And I was put into a coma, then life support, waking up paralyzed from the eyes down. And I lied in a hospital bed for months, hooked to tubes, living on machines. And I lost my job in the hospital. And from there, after that, I went to a rehab facility. And then I was sent home to live in a bed, paralyzed. I was 33. And my entire life, my entire way that I could ever earn an income, which too, there was no expectation that I would walk again. There was nothing like that. So especially at the time, my life was just over. And the real estate and that cash flow that it provided saved my family. We had just had our fourth child. He was 3 months, 4 kids. My wife now has a quadriplegic husband, and he lost his job. And when that happened at the age of 33, my life ended, but the real estate kept me and my family. I view that my recovery, which today I can walk on my own. They didn't think that would ever happen. I used to have leg braces, arm braces. I was in a wheelchair, and et cetera, et cetera. But I can walk on my own. I have to think about it, so I don't have full functionality over my lower legs. I'm in pain 24/7, but I can walk on my own, which they didn't. I was paralyzed for so long, on tubes for so long, they really didn't think that was going to happen ever again. In fact, I left rehab because they're like, AJ, you can keep coming. It's been years, but you're not getting out of your leg equipment and arm equipment and stuff. And so I stopped going to rehab. And I think the reason why I actually was probably able to recover to a point where I could walk was due to the fact that I was not stressed out about not having money. I didn't lose my house. My wife didn't have to leave me with the kids at home, paralyzed in bed, to get a job to try to cover us. I had the ability to recover. But more importantly, I did the one thing that was really important to me as a man. I felt it was my job to make sure I could provide for the family at all costs. That had been immediately taken away. We had 4 kids, obviously just had another one. My wife wasn't working at the time. So we were a single income household. And that was taken from me. And not only that, I became a liability. So that was a big deal, right? To me, as a man in America, that was a big hit and blow. But I had my real estate that provided for my family. So that gave me immense pride. I'm still able to do what I viewed as was my number one job, even though I can't function or do anything. So I became obviously really passionate about real estate investing and doing this and what it means because of what it did for me. We have over 400 million in assets across 10 states. We have over 3 million net rentable square feet. I have over 100 employees now. I started up 3 companies out of my wheelchair, including tech companies and everything else. But that was all due to and because of the fact that I had my original real estate that could take care of me.
Wow. What a story. That's the exact type of scenario that we invest in real estate for. You think that it's, way off in the future that you might have some debilitating problem, when you're in your 80s, but you just never know what's around the corner. So I'm sure you did feel immense pride for, having that safety net for your family. So, man, I have a lot of questions. Let's start at the beginning because you've been immensely successful you're at the top of this asset class. So for somebody who might be just starting out in real estate, maybe they've got a couple doors, maybe they've got some long terms or a short term, or maybe they're just like, you know what, I'm interested in this real estate thing and I don't know which way to go. What would be your advice for somebody who's like, all right, I've got a little bit of money, maybe I want to try self-storage. Like, how do I even find a deal?
Yeah. So this is an important thing. It's important to know that today, if you are looking to get into real estate, you are but possibly the best time to do it. And I don't mean that like, oh yeah, it's great. No, I actually mean that. And this is why. I mean that as a actual ability to execute. When I got started in self-storage, there was no self-storage books. There was no social media. There was no podcasts. There was no nothing. So we literally had to figure out an asset class that we knew nothing about until we started buying it. Back then, storage was actually viewed as a bad thing. So a lot of people hear storage because it's like, oh, it's great, everything. Like everybody talks about it right now. Back then, when we were buying storage, we were kind of made fun of. We had one of our employees like, oh, so you went from being insurance guys to slumlords because they were viewed as junkyards. They're trash. Banks didn't want to lend to them. Investors didn't want them. A lot of people thought it was a fad. Like they literally thought that it would go away. So in that environment, we only learned by doing and figuring it out. That has a lot of risk. Well, and a lot of people are like, well, I can't get a bank loan. And I'm like, well, Try being in an asset class that banks didn't even want to give you money for, period. It didn't matter if times were good. It didn't matter if they were bad. They didn't want to give you money. So I think that a lot of times we can look at different scenarios and put in excuses. And one of the things that was the best benefit for me, which is the best benefit for everybody listening to this, which is kind of funny, but it's the opposite of coins. I didn't know. I was kind of dumb. We didn't know what we didn't know. So your benefit is that you can find out. That can be the downside though too. So if you're looking at getting started, I'd say two things. First of all, you have so much resources at your disposal, it blows my mind. And the ability to execute today is unparalleled. We did not have third parties that did things. We didn't have property management companies. It just didn't exist. If we bought it, we had to do everything. So we didn't have third-party management. We didn't have software. We managing remote, right? That kind of stuff. It didn't exist really in our industry at all, in most industries at the time. So when I look at the hurdles and everything today for people, they're so low compared to what in real estate in general used to be. Real estate back then and further, especially commercial real estate, that was like a thing of the ultra high net worth individuals. It's not today at all. Once again, I can find storage facilities I have in $200,000. This is not something that's uncommon. And you now have all the tools, resources to execute. So I think that if you're trying to get into it, first of all, you need to realize the biggest problem you're going to have is you will have so many resources and so much information, you're not going to know what to do with it. So you're going to need to simplify greatly and understand what you want to buy, why you want to buy it, and make sure that an asset class fits with you. How I look at it is your natural skills that you have, how you understand value, and your resources that you have, put those together and figure out which asset class would fit you best, right? So for me, I liked the business cash flowing asset. There's other people that are like, I actually hate that. I don't want short-term rentals. I don't want storage, right? I want a singular tenant that has a 10-year triple net lease that I can never have to think about it again. And I'm going to go buy a $300,000 building in a small town and have that lease set in place. And I don't want to know anything ever, right? And that's fine. That's great, as long as they know. And then from there, once you figure out what fits you, what opportunities you have, what you can do, right? Understand that, which I'm not saying you have to understand everything. Basics, core principles here for you. Then you go and you learn, but you learn to execute, okay? So lots of times we need to learn just enough to know that we want to do it. But if we learn to figure out if we want to do it and we keep going, the deeper you get, the more complex it gets. It's not lined up with anything execution. So you feel it makes you it's actually worse for you. The reason being is you're learning so much, but you're not doing it, that the complexity of what you're learning it outweighs the actual doing. So it gets skewed in your mind where it's actually not that complex. It's just you have so much information that it seems, and so then you don't want to do it. Be weary of this, everyone, but also take advantage of the resources that you have. In storage, we have, first of all, small markets, big markets, how much you want to spend, what do you want to do, everything else. But there's brokers that do this. You can go find off-market deals, right? Which I did a lot of. So I did a lot of outreach, off-market deals, and I would just basically say, here's a geographic area that I want. So for me, it was the Northwest. Here, I'll give everybody the exact playbook to find a deal in self-storage. Small deals, that's how I got started, okay? So all I did is I live in the Northwest. I needed access to assets. We didn't have a large population. So I took the what we call the Northern Rocky Loop, which is a freeway system that goes through Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and then back around. So it's like a circle that goes around Idaho. It goes into Idaho, out of Idaho, goes around. I took all the cities that were on that loop. They were small towns, right, rural towns, and I listed them out. I found all the cities that were growing, not dying, and I ranked them from 1 to 10. Under a population of under 50,000, right? From there, I went and found all the storage facilities in each one of those towns, and I listed them. So I have a top 10 cities, all the storage facilities in the top 10 cities, and this is all I did. What made a good buy for me was a good location and really poorly run. if I had those two things together, it was a buy. And then I would rank from 1 to 10 the storage facilities, the best being really poorly run, but in a good location. The worst being a poor location, but really well ran. The reason being is a bad asset in a bad location that's being really run really well, to me, had more downside than it did upside. Because it's already running good, it's already at the top, but it's not in a location that may even be able to continue that. Where a bad location, or a good location, but a bad run facility meant there was big upside and I could do it. And my business model was this, and you can do the same. So anyways, I have 10 cities. Now I have a list of top doors. I know exactly who they are. That gave me roughly 50 facilities that I want to buy that I could contact. Now, how we decided our business strategy was that everybody can use here. This is going to be a little complex and you might not understand it, but listen to it a few times and you'll get it. The first step is we answered the phone. The second step is we made sure people paid their bills. And the third step was we made sure people knew where we were. That was our business model. That's it. That's all we did. Wildly successful, funny enough. And so when we say poorly run, those were our three things that we did and we were successful. And so all of a sudden I have a hit list of 50 facilities that I want to buy. I'm not even talking to brokers. I know exactly how to run them, answer the phone, collect payments, and make sure people know that I'm there. And then from there, it was like, okay, let's go out and contact the owners. When I contact the owners, everyone, here's exactly what you do with an owner. Don't ask them to sell their asset. They get hit with that every day, and here's the psychology behind it. You give them a 2-answer scenario. One of the answers says, I've got to tell you all my personal information. I don't know who you are. I don't know. I'm never going to get rid of you. The other one is, I get rid of you right now. That's an easy answer. Everyone's going to say no. And what I found was sellers, people that actually wanted to sell their assets, said no. Because I was talking to them, they said they weren't selling. 3 months later, they would sell. The reason being is they weren't selling because I gave them an option. Sell to me or don't sell. Why would you ever say yes? I don't know who you are. I'm not going to give you my personal information. So instead, everybody, you're like, well, then how do you do it, AJ? Well, what you do is they're in an industry you want to be in. Everyone wants to share their knowledge, expertise, and success. Ask them, I'm looking to get into self-storage. I'd love to have a conversation with you about what you did, how you were successful, and how it's gone. They always want to talk to you, always. From there, you say, I would like to see if this market looks great. Do you know any competitors in this market that would be willing to sell to me? Now what you're doing is you're creating FOMO. Uh-oh, he's going to buy one of my competitors, but I want to get that money. So now if they're at all interested in selling, guess what they say? Why don't you buy me? So I want them to ask me to buy them. That's my goal. They need to ask me to buy them. And then if they don't, that's fine, because guess why? Then they tell you where to go to buy someone else. They say, go talk to Bob. Then I go to Bob and I call up Bob and I said, hey, Bob, me and Steve were just talking. He knows who Steve is because of conversations. I'd love to chat with you about some of the things we're discussing. I have a warm lead. Bob's going to call me right back because Steve told him to. And now I have a warm lead and the person that's going to sell is going to talk to me. Either way, it's a win that way. So now I have all my markets. I have all my assets listed. And then on top of that, I now have discussions with sellers. I'm making friends in the industry. I have a pipeline done, and I've never even talked to a broker, ever, not once. And then on top of that, obviously, you're talking to brokers, and you're telling them. The key to finding deals, though, is this. The number one thing that everybody gets wrong, they don't know what they want, meaning they don't have a buy box. So they call brokers up, and they say, hey, send me some good deals. If you say that to a broker, everyone, this is what they hear. I don't know what I'm doing. I can never execute and I can never buy. Because when you say that, you don't understand that a broker doesn't know what that means. Nobody does. What is a good deal? Because a good deal to investors is very different. What I think is a good deal, lots of investors do not think it's a good deal. So the broker immediately knows you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're talking about. You're a waste of time, resources. And the only way a broker gets paid and makes money is if a deal transacts. Brokers are market makers. That's it. Nothing more. They need a buyer and a seller. If you're not a real buyer, they're never going to talk to you, ever. So instead, know exactly what you want. And then you say, I am looking for a storage facility under $500,000 in these 10 cities that is poorly managed. Do you have any assets in those cities that I can buy? Then what they say is, oh, I have a buyer. I'm going to go either get a seller or I have a seller and I'm going to put them together. That little change, you guys, makes all the difference in deal flow. Now you have an off-market strategy. Now you know how to get deals from brokers right there. That's how I do it.
Management Monday is proud to present this episode of The Short Term Show. Management Monday is a weekly course that will teach you everything you need to know about managing a short-term rental from a distance. How to get more bookings, higher ADR, how to hire and fire vendors. Even if you don't want to manage it yourself, you need this course so you know how to manage your manager. Over 10,000 superhosts started their career with Management Monday. And the best part is, it's free for short-term shop clients. Start your journey today at theshorttermshop.com. Theshorttermshop.com. If you like what you're hearing, if you're picking up what I'm putting down, you can join me on a live weekly call to talk about your next short-term rental or ask questions about the one you already have. I am live once per week on Zoom and would love to have you come and say hello. It's strquestions.com. That's strquestions.com. Come and join us.
Lots of things I want to comment on here, but I think that to back up to kind of what you said towards the beginning is that, like, when I started with short terms, there were no YouTube channels, there were no gurus, there were no courses, there was nothing like that either. And now I see people where it's nice for people who want to invest now because there is so much information out there, but at the same time, it gets overly complicated. We'll have people call us and say things like, okay, I want to do this and that and this and that, but this person, I took this course and they said do this. I took that course and they said do that. And I kind of have to reel them in and be like, hey guys, we are just buying houses and renting them. We're not curing cancer here. It kind of sounds like the same thing with storage. Yep. And again, I think that it's also really important when you do call a broker that you do know what you want to buy, because same thing, when I get a call from somebody and they're like, well, I'm looking everywhere in the country. How about Dallas? And I'm like, well, we operate in a very specific type of market, in vacation markets. Like Dallas just banned short-term rentals altogether. You clearly haven't done any research. Yep. You probably are not going to be somebody who ends up buying this stuff.
And you could sense that right away, right? But you immediately know. So and brokers know, the market knows. Like, you have to have a buy box of what type of asset you want, but you also have to have a buy box of the market you want to be in. So like when I started out, I said, we need small assets because this is what we can afford. And also, I don't want to compete. And two, big cities scared me because that's where big money was. And so I knew that prices would be higher, but competition would be better. That's it. That's how I chose my market. Nothing at all more than that. I needed a deal I could afford. And two, I didn't want to be in a market where people would spend lots of money and the competition was really hot. Basically, I wanted to have a strategy where I could answer the phone, make people pay bills, and let people know where I was, and it would win. That's it. That was our whole thinking process and strategy. And guess what? It worked because I knew exactly the market I wanted to be in. Although it was simple, it was precise. The one contingency was I didn't want it dying. It had to be growing, even if that was a teeny bit. It just couldn't be shrinking. So outside that, I knew exactly the markets I wanted, the geographic region I wanted. And then I knew the exact type of asset that I wanted, but it was very simple. People are like, well, I don't know what I want. And I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about it. And they're like, well, how did you decide? And I was like, I could afford this. I lived here and I wanted to make sure that I could do basically nothing and still make money in this way. Like it was so simple, right? And I think that you're right. People don't do even the basic amount of research. They don't even think about it for themselves. And that really comes across to market participants know and understand that. And especially when you're talking to owners or brokers, everything else. So doing a little bit of research can go, and understanding a very simple thing. I want to buy this in these types of places. that is, funny enough, that's actually a big deal. Most people don't get there.
I totally agree with that. And the last big question that I have before we move on to the last three questions of the show is around finding deals. So self-storage kind of followed a similar trajectory of short-term rentals. Like there really weren't a lot of people doing it. And then all of a sudden it kind of rode this wave of being this crazy buzzword that everybody wanted to invest in self-storage, and it was everywhere. And people now, I hear a lot of things like, well, there's no more deals left. Like it's a saturated space. There's no deals left. So how do you find a deal? How do you know what a good deal is? With short terms, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, similar thing with self-storage, since you do have the ability to kind of immediately manipulate pricing. So, with long-term apartment buildings, the rent is what the rent is until 2 years from now when somebody moves out.
Exactly.
Well, with short terms or self-storage, you can let me change the price on these couple units that are open.
Day one, we do it.
Yeah. So how do you, when you're looking for a deal, A, what constitutes a deal? Or B, if it's not a deal at the numbers that it sits at, what can you do to get it to be at the numbers that you need it to be for it to constitute being a deal?
As you know, obviously, and I know this is the magic of what you do and I do, it is that we can see what that value can be, and how to get there, not by Mr. Market. This is the difference. People in general view real estate as this. I buy something and Mr. Market, the god of the economies, makes it worth more for me. I hated that. Being a sales guy, I'm like, no, I have to make my income, right? And so this idea that it magically appears, I was like, this is crazy, right? I can't plan. What do I buy then? What does that even mean? So all of a sudden, that idea alone makes people, I think, do really bad deals. But then they're right. They can't find any deals because they're trying to find deals that Mr. Market's just going to make amazing without ever knowing if Mr. Market's going to do it or not. How do you find something? It doesn't make sense, right? So for us, when we look at it, first of all, the saturation point. 50% of all self-storage assets are owned by mom and pop single owners. 50% of our entire industry. There are more storage facilities than there are McDonald's, Starbucks, everything combined. There's 60,000 storage facilities in the United States. So there is storage facilities all over, and big money and big investors, even like me, we don't go into 80% of all the markets. 80% of the United States, guys like me and big guys, I'm not a big player. I'm not institutional, anything else like that. I'm not a REIT. We can't go into into 80% of the United States. The reason being is we can't allocate enough capital. So I want to buy something for $4 or $5 million. Well, in storage, $4 or $5 million, right? That is actually you have tons of markets that assets won't even get to that price range. So all of a sudden now, you have mom and pop single operator owns that you go to cities all over America, and that's the only people that are there. It's the equivalent of somebody owning a home. It's just Bob, right? So the inventory level and stuff, it's not like multifamily. 90% of multifamily is institutionalized. 90%.
Wow.
So 9 out of every 10 assets that you see is owned by institutional grade people. How do you compete with that? I couldn't. That's why I didn't do it. I'm like, how am I supposed to? These people are experts. I'm not. And so when we look then to go, how do we find those? We go to, first of all, where it's available. I don't try to go to Dallas and try to buy a REIT facility for $30 million, right? No, I don't do that. I go to a small one. I talk to a mom and pop, and then I look at the market. And what I do is I say, what are you charging? What's your occupancy? What are the other rates charging? What is their occupancy? And then I look for a spread. I look for what I call money on the table. Money on the table is this. Money that's sitting there, the owner just hasn't taken it off because they either didn't want to do the thing or they didn't know how. Now, people are like, well, why would they do that? Almost all of them do. I mean that. Mom and pops, most 9 out of 10 do. The reason is they don't want to raise rents. Because when you raise rents, people call you and they're mad. It doesn't take very long for you to go, I'm not doing this anymore because I keep getting all these people who may be my friends, everything else like that are mad. So all of a sudden, they're not even going up with the market. So there could be a huge spread right there. Also, we have a difference of what is called physical and economic occupancy. Physical occupancy, make this really simple. You have 100 doors, 90 of the doors have a tenant in them and a lock on a door. That is a 90% occupied facility. Economic occupancy works like this. You have 100 doors and you charge 10 by 10s, whatever it is, $100 for the door. Now, out of that 100 doors, 50 of those doors are $50. The reason being is they've never upped rents. They've been in there for a long time, right? You have people that, whatever reason. Now, the reality is it's all over the board, right? But we're just using simple, $50. So the economic occupancy of that facility is actually more like 70%. What that tells me is this. I can buy it, and all I need to do is make tenants pay what they should be paying, and I can increase that revenue, gross revenue, by 20%. That can double my net income. Therefore, I double the value of the facility day one. Now, we look at the market rents. Okay, they're below market rents. Then we up those. So we go and we're selling things at market price. Just that rate strategy right there, you can literally double the asset's value. We've done it time and time and time again. And now you have other things that you can do. You can do online ads. The easiest thing to do is if a storage facility is not online, there's so much money on the table because nobody even knows they exist, right? So that's my third point, remember. So my second point was make people pay. That's what I described, rates, things like that. When I go to buy a facility, I can see how much money is on the table if I first, they don't answer the phone, meaning that they're not running a basic business. This is vastly the norm. Second is they're not making people pay. They're not only not pay, they can have delinquencies of 15%. So all you do is make people pay, and you upped gross revenue by 15%. That's a 50% increase in net income. Just by saying pay your bill, nothing even else. From there, you change the rates, and all of a sudden you doubled your net income, and that's the money on the table. Making people pay and pay what they should be paying. And then third, we have our last one. So make sure people know where they are. If they're not online, put them online and run some basic ads. Right there, everybody, I can tell you, and I can actually look in a simple, very simple pro forma. Like a lot of people look at these pro formas and they make these Excel spreadsheets. I was like, this is crazy. I made a one-page A/B modeler that all it did was literally show me how much money was on the table. I just punch in rates, I punch in everything else, and I go, all right, I buy you, I make this. I take you over and I do those simple three things and I make this. That means I just made this much value and this much money and I'm this much more wealthy. Then I buy it. That's it. That's all I do. That's what I do every single flipping day. And that's why we took our simple money and our portfolio and we got a $150 million portfolio without any investors. None. We accrued 1 million plus net rentable square feet across 4 states without ever taking an investor. Because we would do that, we'd increase the value, I'd refinance it, I'd take our money and profits out, I'd still own it, and then I'd go buy another one. I'd just go buy the one that I could see the money on the table. I wasn't even guessing. I'm like, that's how much money we'll make. That's it. And so for me, I'm like, this is very simple. I can buy these 5 assets. This one has the most money that I can make that's sitting on the table. I'll buy it. Then next, I went find 5 more. This one has the most. I'll buy it. Then the next. Then the next. And within a 10-year period of time, we created 70 plus million in equity.
So what you're saying is the way to become wealthy with real estate investing is to figure out what your strategy is going to be, keep it simple, and just keep repeating it. And don't try to get crazy.
Over and over again. Don't make it complicated. Make it simple. I like to think like this. I call it my margin of stupidity. And my margin of stupidity is very important to me because I'm stupid. So when I look at it, people that concern me are people that think they're smart and make things complex. Because first of all, that means they're actually probably adding in lots of risk that doesn't need to be. They don't understand the situation at all. For me, I want my margin of stupidity that means I can buy something and be stupid and it'll still work. So what I do is I don't buy negative cash flow. I don't buy things that have rates on debt that change, floating rates, trip rates, anything else like that, right? Because I want to be able to buy it, do nothing, be an idiot, and I'm just going to still make money, right? So there can't be a contingency even on my success. All I need to do is make people pay their bills. That value add part, I'm not even including in there. So my margin of stupidity is exactly what we're talking about. I have a margin of stupidity and money on the table. That defines how I created $100 million in equity over 15 years. And all I did was have a margin of stupidity. And then I had my margin of stupidity made it so we not only survived, but thrived through 2008. Everybody else was guessing where rates would go and what would happen with the economy and everything. I'm like, well, I don't know. So I'm going to just lock in for a decade because there's no way that I can know. And so I don't want to try to time markets because I'm not smart. I'm not trying to, everybody's like, oh yeah, buy low, sell high. And I'm like, how do you know what's high and low? That's contingent on the current situation. And what I realized was investors think of value as extrinsic value. This lesson here, everybody, doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't even matter real estate. If you get this, you'll be able to do what I've done. I have a portfolio of like 8, 9 companies that do over $1 million plus a year. I have 2, 3 companies worth over $100 million because I understand this concept. Extrinsic value is the value of the asset on the market, meaning buyers and sellers. So you go on the market and everybody's like, all right, well, I'll pay $1 million. No, I'll pay $1.5 million. Okay, it's sold for $1.5 million. The value is $1.5 million. That didn't make sense to me because just because Bob's an idiot and paid $1.5 million doesn't mean that's what the value is. And so intrinsic value is what you get for what you buy. So if I buy a facility, a storage facility, and it makes $20,000 a year, that's the value. It's the $20,000 a year. So what I did was simply say, extrinsic value, I can't control. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how to value that. I don't know how to understand it. So I have to take that out of the equation. The only time that that ever actually comes into play is if you're buying or selling and if you have to refinance. Extrinsic value is actually the time where everybody dies. That's where everybody gets killed in investing. Why? Because I went through 2008 and saw when people had cash flowing, profitable assets and they lost them. Do you know how confusing that was to me? How did you lose it? It's a profitable business. You pay your debts, everything else. Well, that's because the value dropped. The value didn't drop. It's still making money. In a lot of cases, it actually made more money. Well, it's because all of a sudden Mr. Market got to decide. So if I could take that out and I could buy on that intrinsic value, find that money on the table, then I didn't care, meaning that my asset could be worth $2 million, then $1 million or $3 million, and it didn't matter. And 2, I could then decide if I wanted to sell or anything else like that based upon craziness of the market. I was never forced into it. I was never anything done like that. As long as I could pay my debts, pay my bill, make a profit, I was fine. So my margin of stupidity meant I had to be fine. Mr. Market couldn't decide my fate. And 2, also, I had to be able to basically do nothing, make a lot of mistakes, and I would be okay. Now, if I wanted to get that value, that money on the table, everything else, I just had to measure it. So for me, very simple concepts. I'm not trying to be so smart that I know what Mr. Market's going to do. I don't. I have no clue. I don't know where interest rates are going, right? I have lots of ideas, which is funny too, everybody. I'm actually a huge macroeconomic buff. I study it. I did an MBA in it because I was so interested in it. After I'd already started businesses and investing, I literally went and got an MBA just to ask questions. I didn't even need it. I don't even care. I just want to ask questions. And so I went and I studied macroeconomics because 2008, going through that, being a business owner investor, I'm like, I don't know what's happening. So I just went to ask questions. So I actually love macroeconomics. I love understanding how those things work. I have a podcast where I literally dedicate and give all the data to that. When I invest, I don't think about that. I don't care because I can't control it. And that's where the margin of stupidity comes into play. Keep it simple, keep it repeatable, and then you build a system around a simple, repeatable concept. And it works. And then Mr. Market comes in, and over time, Mr. Market does make you more money and value. And then you say, thank you, Mr. Market. But you don't build a system around it, right? You don't build that. If you do that, you will end up and result will be had. I mean, it's shocking to me, actually. I never thought in a 10-year period of time what could happen. We assumed that, it really just blew my mind. We didn't know what valuations would be created. We didn't know anything like that. We didn't worry about it. We just did our one thing. And then 10 years later, we were just like, almost like, how did this even happen? We have such dumb, simple ideas and concepts, and they were so powerful. And that is the most important thing.
Margin of stupidity, guys. That's your new favorite metric.
That's right. It's the most important one.
All right, AJ. So we're coming to the last 3 questions of the show. We ask everyone these same 3 questions. And the first question, which you've kind of already answered, what advice would you give 20-year-old AJ if you knew then what you know now?
Oh, 20-year-old AJ. Holy cow. Advice, there's the biggest list that I could ever even imagine. 20-year-old AJ needed a lot of help. The biggest thing that I could ever tell him is not knowing how to get where you want to go is okay, but not going forward is not. Being okay moving forward and not understanding not only how it'll play out, but maybe not even knowing where I'm supposed to go, and not to worry about it nearly as much. Instead, like we were just talking about, simplify, build processes, and just go down it. You can always pivot, you always change. I did. I've done gyms, I've built brokerage firms, I have a tech company, I've done lots of things, right? And I failed a lot. I almost went bankrupt because I did a bad acquisition of a business. Why? Because I thought I was smart, and I learned really fast. No matter how smart I thought I was, I am not that smart, and nobody else is. And so I think that this idea of I have to know where I'm going, I have to know how to get there, and I have to be smart to do it. Holy cow, that is so wrong. So wrong.
All right. Great advice. And next question, kind of related to that. What advice would you give a new investor who's looking to get started with their real estate investment portfolio today? Kind of a weird time in real estate in 2024.
2024 is the greatest opportunity that we have had since the financial crisis for an individual that has nothing to get into real estate. And everybody listening to this may be going, oh, okay, like this is a hype thing, you're pumping up. No, I'm not kidding. And here's why. When markets are good, it's always interesting for me that people are like, oh, I'm going to wait till interest rates drop. I'm like, oh, so you have a lot of money. No, I don't. Oh, well then how does that benefit you? Because people with money benefit when interest rates lower. They're the ones that buy everything up. They're the ones that get money. So when markets are good, that benefits people with money, not you. So good markets make fluid markets. It makes sellers go out. It makes easy transactions, and money game is what wins. In bad markets and markets where interest rates are high, those people that have lots of money are at a massive disadvantage now. So I have, obviously, now I have money. So I'm not going to do so many things because it is not worth it, because my advantage is allocation of capital, things like that, right? When I started out, banks wouldn't lend us money. So we didn't have an advantage of easy capital, things like that, to get money because, first of all, the asset class and everything else. So when we went and talked to owners, the owners would seller finance us deals. They would give it, they would become the bank, right? So that means I took out the money component. So my weakness was my strength in down markets. When markets were hot, it was the opposite. I was at a disadvantage. I was at a huge disadvantage. So this is the part that I really worry about people starting out and new investors, is they think that somehow good markets benefit them. I don't get it. How? How does it benefit you? Everything that makes a good market work, you don't have. But in a bad market, those people that need to sell, transact, everything else, they have no options. So the fact that you are actually going to work with them means you are their option. So I did an $8 million deal 4 months ago in a city with 2.5 million people, off-market seller finance deal after 3 years, 3% interest rate fixed. $8 million in a city of 2.5 million people. Now, that was impossible. That would have never happened prior to the last 2 years. I could have never accomplished that. So when you look at it, that's in a big market with a big asset. That is 85,000 net rentable square feet in a main road. Think about all of the owners and facilities in markets that are 100,000 people, 50,000 people, 30,000 people. They have no options. So it's either you're going to play the bank, you're going to sell or finance, you're going to work with me, or you're not going to sell it. So now all of a sudden, being a beginner, they have to work with you. And this is your greatest opportunity, everybody. It's simple. It doesn't mean it's easy, right? You got to work, but that's the whole thing. You don't have money. So yeah, work. If you don't got millions of dollars, work, right? And then, so when you look at it that way, I really, it's hard for me to express this opportunity. And it's only because I went through it and I understand it. I went through it prior to 2008 in an asset class that banks wouldn't lend to. After 2008, banks didn't work. Owners had no options. I was shocked how hard it actually got to make money when markets were going up, which that sounds weird, but it's true, unless you're a big player in a big bank. So this won't last long, everybody. After 25, it's over. And then we'll probably be in another bull market. You have a window of opportunity today to go into markets, not worry about banks, do the work. Owners will actually sell to you, they'll work with you, and you can accrue assets that in a normal economic environment, you could not.
Also, really great advice. Very actionable for right now, for sure. And last question, what's your favorite book that's impacted your mindset?
The Warren Buffett Way. If you want to understand real estate, don't read a real estate book. So go read The Warren Buffett Way, and what he talks about is valuations. And there's lots of things. He talks about management, things like that. But he talks about valuations, the simplification of a strategy, fundamentals, and then how to understand it. It's a business book. I read it when I was 20. It wildly changed my perception on everything. I didn't understand 80% of it. I read it like 8 times. I probably still don't understand very simple concepts that is taught in that book. I read it every couple of years. That is, though, the number one thing that affected my real estate journey. It was not real estate books. And here's why. Now, with that said, I am launching a 400-page real estate book in a month and a half. My self-storage book. My first one was a bestseller. This one's twice the size. So I'm not bashing on real estate books. I write them and I provide what I want. But when you look, though, at the Warren Buffett Way, when you look at what they're talking about, as opposed to real estate books, are tactics. And what it's important to know, everybody, is the tactics you can do while you're doing it. That's actually not that important when you're starting. We talked about buy box, markets, knowing what you want. You're like, yeah, but how do I do a PSA? How do I do a contract on this, right? Well, what about the financing situation? Go find somebody that knows. Go get attorneys. Those are tactics in which you have other people help you execute. The most important thing is, though, value, know what you're looking for, and how to find it. After that, you can find professionals and you can ask and you can read all the tactics, Google it. How do I make an offer here? Join a mastermind, right? I have a self-storage mastermind and that's all people are doing. They're in there trying to buy, and then I'm sitting here going, this is how we do it. This is where deals are. This is how we find it, right? The tactics, though. You pay people for tactics. The problem is most people don't even get to that point because they're trying to do tactics without understanding value and what they're trying to buy. Really important.
All right. Well, I definitely look forward to reading your second book when it comes out. So if our listeners want to find you, find your first book, follow you, join your mastermind, all of the above, how can they do that?
Yeah. So I'm a little obnoxious. You Google self-storage and I'm probably going to come up on most things. AJ Osborne, self-storage, it'll be endless. The amount of information I give away. I just try to teach. When I got out of the hospital, or when I was in the hospital, I was going home Christmas morning for the first time. It was snowing outside my rehab facility. I was living in a rehab facility window, and I got a hospital-assisted visit to see my children. And I got to go home. And I was so excited because it was going to be Christmas morning. And I was like, oh, this is going to be amazing. They're going to open up presents. They're going to be spoiled, right? I have been hospitalized. I was planting trees when I went in. I lost my job. And I realized at that moment that I was not only not worried about that, I was like, oh, my kids are going to get spoiled and I'm going to be in my own house. And at that moment, it dawned on me that this is the most important thing that has ever happened to me, is the fact that I don't need to worry about this, that I am set up in a position. So I made a promise, and that was that I would teach and I would allow other people to join me. So I started a private equity firm, and then I started teaching. I do Self-Storage Income podcast every single week. We are completely open and transparent. Everything. I tell it all. My books, everything. We tell case studies. We don't hold something back. So that, and then if you want on Instagram, AJ Osborne, and then you can just kind of see what it looks like and what we do, how we run a private equity firm, right? All of that. So self-storage income's the educational side. AJ Osborne, Instagram, anything else, right? Go find it. It's I'm verified on there, so make sure you don't follow some scammer or something like that.
All right. Well, AJ, thank you so much for coming on. What a wealth of information on this episode.
Happy to do so. Thank you.